Hello, my name is Olu Osha. I like talking about American presidents. Today I'm going to provide a list of all the number of terms our presidents served in office and the states they were associated with. All our presidents came from a state, but apart from that, we'll see that they're often associated with more than one state because of course people moved around and so they may have been born somewhere in one state and they may have taken up residence and represented another state. So let's get into it. Our first president, of course, George Washington, is from Virginia, right? And of course he's from Virginia. He's the first president who had two terms, right? He had two terms. There were people who wanted to make him king, make him have more than one tenure. But of course, he was a very humble and dignified man, and he had two terms, which became customary. It became customary to serve two terms until, of course, we would find that one of our presidents, FDR, let me let the cat out of the bag. He served four terms, and of course, after that, there was a 22nd Amendment limiting presidents to just two terms, right? Two terms. Each term, of course, is 4 years, but our presidents can actually serve a maximum of 10 years. They can't serve more than 10 years. That's because sometimes we've had cases where the vice president succeeds an incapacitated or a president who's been killed in office or died in office. And so if he gets to serve, just less than 2 years of that, of his original principal, the original president who died in office, if a succeeding vice president gets to serve less than 2 years, he can have his own full, he or she can have his own full, can have their own full two terms in office. So that's all for a maximum of 10 years. So they can't do more than 10 years in office. But if they succeeded a president who died in office and say they did 3 years, then that succeeding vice president can only have one tenure, one other term, one elected term in office. So our presidents are limited to two elected terms and an additional less than 2 years for a maximum of 10 years. But let's get on with the list. Our second president was John Adams from Massachusetts. He had one term in office, and he was the first president who did not attend his successor's inauguration, right? So John Adams did not attend his former best friend, that's Thomas Jefferson. He didn't attend his former BFF's inauguration. He headed straight off to Massachusetts. His wife was there. I think she was ill anyway. His wife Abigail Adams was in Massachusetts at the time, so he left, and he didn't attend Thomas Jefferson's inauguration. Don't quote me on that. It's been a while since I read David McCullough's excellent biography of John Adams. Our third president was Thomas Jefferson, who I just mentioned. He was from Virginia. He had two terms in office. Our fourth president was James Madison from Virginia as well. He had two terms in office. Now, another interesting fact about James Madison that I never mentioned: James Madison is the only president who had two vice presidents who both died in office. His first vice president was a guy called George Clinton, and George Clinton was actually Thomas Jefferson's vice president as well. After Aaron Burr had assassinated my favorite American immigrant, Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson selected a second vice president, who was George Clinton. He was an elderly man. He had been governor of New York. That's George Clinton, and so George Clinton became vice president to James Madison. He died in office of a heart attack. After he died, a guy called Elbridge Gerry from Massachusetts succeeded him as vice president. He died of a stroke. So one of the most hazardous jobs in our early founding was to be vice president to James Madison. It appears, right? Both his vice presidents died in office. I guess nobody wanted that office out after Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts died in office, because the position was left vacant. We've had several presidents who didn't have a vice president. By the way, Franklin Pierce, after William Rufus King died, I don't think he had a vice president for the rest of his tenure. There have been several instances like that. I think John Tyler as well. But let me move on. So James Madison, another interesting fact about James Madison is he was not only the shortest president we ever had, he always dressed in black. So even though he was a brilliant man, he's known as the father of our Constitution. By the way, Elbridge Gerry, gerrymandering is named after Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts. Gerrymandering, that word came after, it was coined after, Elbridge Gerry. So let's move on from James Madison, who was also from Virginia, by the way. I've said before that Ohio had the most presidents, it's produced the most presidents, but remember, our presidents moved around often. So if we were to just use where they were born instead of the residence they took up or where they grew up in, sometimes it's Virginia, because two presidents who came from who were born in Virginia, if sometimes they're affiliated with other places, such as Zachary Taylor. Zachary Taylor was born in Virginia, but he moved to Kentucky. He became a life resident of Kentucky. Of course, he was He was pretty nomadic as a soldier, because he was a soldier. And who else? William Henry Harrison was born in Virginia. William Henry Harrison would go on to become the governor of Indiana Territory. So if you were to add all these people, and who else? Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson was born in Virginia, but he grew up in Georgia and South Carolina. These are going to come up later on. So if you were to include these people, I guess you could say Virginia has the most presidents. But typically, Ohio and Virginia, they're pretty much up there. But let me continue. So I stopped at James Madison, and after James Madison there was James Monroe, our fifth president. He also was from Virginia. After James Monroe, our sixth president was John Quincy Adams, who is from Massachusetts, was from Massachusetts like his dad. He had just one term. By the way, James Madison had two terms as well. James Monroe also had two terms. John Quincy Adams, like his dad, had just one term. And like his dad, he also did not attend his successor's inauguration. So after John Quincy Adams, our seventh president was Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson had two terms in office. Interestingly, Andrew Jackson was born in North Carolina, in between North Carolina and South Carolina. So it's disputed the region where he was born. It's sometimes it's called South Carolina, sometimes it's called North Carolina. Remember, that was the beginning of of our nation, and so the geography, the mapping had not yet taken this sort of discrete, distinct form delineation that we have today. So sometimes he's said to be born in North Carolina, that's Andrew Jackson, sometimes in South Carolina. But importantly, he moved around a lot, and he ended up representing Tennessee. He was a justice from Tennessee, Tennessee's Superior Court. So even though he became an orphan, he was orphaned as a young man, he went through a lot. There was a time he had been during the Revolutionary War, he and his brother were actually captured when they were underage, and they had to serve the British forces. And so, in fact, it is said, I think he got a scar, or he was like tortured by the British forces, even though when he was a kid. In any event, he did grow up in Tennessee. He represented Tennessee in Congress, and he was a justice in representing Tennessee. And he had two terms. After Andrew Jackson was his vice president, Martin Van Buren, who had one term. And Martin Van Buren, even though he was the brilliant organizer who really formed and the brain behind the Democratic Party that's normally affiliated with his principal, Andrew Jackson, because he used his, the Regency Albany, the Albany Regency party machine, which he led to form a great, very strong Democratic Party. So and Martin Van Buren, one term from New York. After Martin Van Buren, so Martin Van Buren was our 8th president. Our 9th president was William Henry Harrison from Virginia. Like I mentioned, he became governor of Indiana, so he took up residence in Indiana. He died in office, shortest term, so he had one term, died in office after just 1 month. His vice president, John Tyler, was from Virginia as well. He had just one term. And he didn't have a vice president, by the way. And after John Tyler was James Polk. James Polk was our 11th president, James Knox Polk. He was born in North Carolina, but he lived in and represented Tennessee. He was congressman from Tennessee. He had one term. He decided early on at the onset of his presidency that he wanted to have just one term. He tried to establish it as a law that presidents should be limited to one term, but he was unsuccessful. He's considered one of the most productive U.S. presidents because he succeeded in accomplishing all the items on his agenda. He's of course responsible for the Mexican American War that added Alta California, and of course Texas was annexed under him. But let's move on. After James Knox Polk, our 11th president was Zachary Taylor. Zachary Taylor was born in Virginia as well. Zachary Taylor had one term because he died in office just after 1 year after eating poison berries. He had one term, and even though he was born in Virginia, he spent most of his life in Kentucky. Even though as a soldier he was a nomad as well, but he spent most of his life in Kentucky, and he owned plantations in Louisiana. So you can see these presidents, I guess, had multiple residences. So after Zachary Taylor, his vice president Millard Fillmore would succeed him. He had just one term in office. Millard Fillmore was from New York. After Millard Fillmore was James Buchanan. James Buchanan's from Pennsylvania. He had just one term in office, bachelor president, and the rumors actually it was Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson mocked him. I'm not going to use the what did he say? He would say there was a derogatory term that he used to refer to James Buchanan and William Rufus King. William Rufus King died in office. He was vice president to Franklin Pierce. Franklin Pierce was our 14th president. He was the president after Millard Fillmore. So Franklin Pierce was from New Hampshire. He had just one term in office. He was a Democrat, by the way. Maybe I should actually state, I'll do another video and state the parties they were affiliated with as well. But as I continue, I'll state the parties these presidents were affiliated with. Of course, our first president wasn't affiliated with any party, but Franklin Pierce was a Democrat, and he had just one term. He was from New Hampshire. His vice president, William Rufus King, died in office. Andrew Jackson used to disparage him, and James Buchanan, who is the only president who was a bachelor throughout his life. William Rufus King was also a bachelor as vice president throughout his life, but there were rumors that both of them were partners, and so in any event, after Franklin Pierce was our 15th president, James Buchanan. He had just one term in office. He was from Pennsylvania. As I said, Franklin Pierce was from New Hampshire. and James Buchanan was a Democrat as well. And after James Buchanan was Abraham Lincoln, my favorite president. He had 2 terms in office, but he died in his second term. He was from Kentucky. He was born in Kentucky, but he represented Illinois, right? He represented Illinois, but he was from Kentucky. That's Abraham Lincoln. And after his assassination, Andrew Johnson took over. Andrew Johnson had just one term. Andrew Johnson had been a Democrat. He was actually not a Republican. There was a National Unity Party or something like that that was formed because, during the time of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln was trying to persuade pro-union and anti-slavery Democrats to support the Union. So Andrew Johnson had just one term in office. He was from Tennessee. And after Andrew Johnson was Ulysses Grant, one of my favorite presidents. Ulysses Grant, of course, was the commanding general of the U.S. Army, the Union Army, and he preserved the Union, defeating the Confederates. And he was from Ohio. He had 2 terms in office. He tried unsuccessfully to get a 3rd term. Of course, there was a stalwart faction of the Republican Party that tried to, led by Roscoe Conklin, who tried to secure a 3rd term for Ulysses Grant. This was unsuccessful. After Ulysses Grant, who was our 18th president, there was 19. Number 19 was Rutherford B. Hayes, who was from Ohio as well. He was a Harvard Law School graduate. He, had been a general, a hero, and he was a Republican. Ulysses Grant was a Republican as well, and Rutherford B. Hayes was a Republican. He had just 1 term in office, was from Ohio. After Rutherford B. Hayes was James Garfield, number 20. James Garfield was from Ohio. He was a Republican. He, of course, was killed in office after just a few months. He had a gruesome death because he didn't die immediately. The lunatic Charles Guiteau, who thought Garfield owed him an appointment, believing he helped Garfield actually win the presidency. He had shot him, thinking that, Chester A. Arthur, who was the vice president to James Garfield, would be happy and would reward him. Of course, not a chance. And in any event, Chester A. Arthur became our 21st president. Chester A. Arthur had just 1 term in office. Interestingly, Chester A. Arthur was born in Vermont. He was born in Vermont, but he grew up in New York, in Schenectady, New York. There are rumors that he was actually from Canada, because his father had lived in Quebec, Canada at some point. But Chester A. Arthur was from, he was from Vermont, and he grew up in New York. He became collector of the ports of New York. He became chief engineer of New York militia, and he did a number of jobs for the state of New York. He represented New York, even though he was born in Vermont. And after him, he had just 1 term in office as well. After Chester A. Arthur was Grover Cleveland, who was our 22nd and 24th president. So he's the first president to have 2 non-consecutive terms. And so he was from New Jersey. He was a Democrat. So he was the first Democrat since the Civil War who became president. After Grover Cleveland's first term was Benjamin Harrison, who of course was a grandson of William Henry Harrison. Benjamin Harrison had just 1 term in office. Benjamin Harrison was from Ohio, and he was a Republican. And of course, after his 1 term, Grover Cleveland defeated him again, right? So Benjamin Harrison is the only American president to have been defeated and succeeded by his predecessor in office. So after Grover Cleveland, whom I mentioned already, had 2 non-consecutive terms. He was number 22 and number 24, and he was from New Jersey. After him was William McKinley, who is another lawyer from Ohio. He had 2 terms, but he died in his second term. And Teddy Roosevelt that's William McKinley. He was assassinated in his second term by an anarchist, and William McKinley William McKinley was succeeded by his vice president, the young Teddy Roosevelt, who became the youngest. He's the youngest president we've ever had at the age of 42 years old. He had 2 terms in office. He completed William McKinley's second term, and he had his own 1 term. And he was a Republican. He was succeeded by his protege, William Howard Taft, who had just 1 term. He was a Republican. He went on to become Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He's the only president we've ever had to be to have become served as a Chief Justice as well of the United States Supreme Court. Of course, I've mentioned he was the heaviest president as well. But anyway, William Howard Taft was a Republican. After William Howard Taft, William Howard Taft was from Ohio. After William Howard, Teddy Roosevelt was from New York, by the way. Teddy Roosevelt was from New York. He was Republican. And I said earlier on, Grover Cleveland was from New Jersey. So William Howard Taft was from Ohio, and he was a Republican. After William Howard Taft was Woodrow Wilson. Interestingly, Woodrow Wilson was born in Virginia. He had 2 terms. He was a Democrat. Although he was born in Virginia, he grew up in South Carolina and Georgia, and he became governor of New Jersey because he moved to Princeton as a professor, and he became president of Princeton. He's our only president who had a PhD. He was a Democrat, like I said, and after he died, after his second term, he had a stroke in his second term, by the way. And of course, his wife. It is said that his wife is the only woman who fulfilled the functions of a president. But anyway, Americans didn't know this, by the way. So because we didn't have such an intrusive, pervasive, and ubiquitous media like we do today. But after the presidency of Woodrow Wilson, who was a Democrat, was Warren G. Harding, who was a Republican. And Warren G. Harding was from Ohio. He had just 1 term. He didn't complete his term because he died in office. He had a stroke. He died in office, or a heart attack. It's unclear, but he died in office in the midst of the Teapot Dome scandal. And his vice president, Calvin Coolidge, had completed his term, and he had 1 elected term as well. And he was Republican. Warren G. Harding was a Republican as well. And Calvin Coolidge was born in Vermont, but he grew up in Massachusetts, and he represented Massachusetts as a governor. And he spent his professional life as a lawyer in Massachusetts. Now, after Calvin Coolidge was Herbert Hoover, and Herbert Hoover was from Iowa, and he grew up in Oregon and California. He went to school at Stanford. He's the only president who went to Stanford. Herbert Hoover was a Republican, and he had just 1 term in office. And of course, he was our 31st president. And our 32nd president was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Roosevelt was from New York, and he's the only president who had 4 terms. He died in his 4th term in office of a cerebral hemorrhage. And of course, after his tenure, they passed the 22nd Amendment, which limited presidents to 2 elected terms, right? They couldn't have more than 2 elected terms, and they can't spend more than 10 years in office in the event that they had succeeded a deceased president who died in office. So After Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a Democrat, of course, and as I said, he had 4 terms. He was from New York. He was succeeded by the 33rd president. Our 33rd president was Harry Truman from Missouri. He was from Missouri. Harry Truman had 2 terms. He had 1 elected term, and he completed FDR's 4th term. So he was a Democrat as well. After Harry Truman, who was from Missouri, was Ike. Everybody loves Ike. Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was a 5-star general, and he's a West Point graduate. He was a Republican, and by the way, Truman was a Democrat, like FDR. So Dwight D. Eisenhower was a Republican. He was born in Texas, but he grew up in Kansas, and so Dwight D. Eisenhower was a Republican. He had 2 terms. After Dwight D. Eisenhower was John F. Kennedy, who was from Massachusetts. He had just 1 term because he died in office as a Democrat. He was assassinated, and he was succeeded by Lyndon B. Johnson as a Democrat, who had 2 terms, as in he had 1 elected term, and he completed John F. Kennedy's term in office. And Lyndon B. Johnson was from Texas. After Lyndon B. Johnson was so Lyndon B. Johnson was our 36th president, he was from Texas. After him was Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was our 37th president. He was from California. He's the only president to have resigned. He was a Republican who resigned in his 2nd term due to the Watergate scandal. The Watergate scandal was when he'd sent some agents, some spies, who burglarized, were breaking in. They broke into the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee at Watergate. Watergate is a hotel where the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee, their party offices were. And so, due to the scandal, Nixon had to resign in office. So he's the only president to resign in office, and he was a Republican. He was from California. He had 2 terms. He didn't conclude his 2nd term. Gerald Ford succeeded him. He was a Republican. He had been congressman before. Gerald Ford was from Nebraska. He graduated from Yale Law. He was from Nebraska. He had just 1 term in office. He was never elected president. He succeeded Nixon in his 2nd term. He lost to Jimmy Carter, who was from Georgia. Jimmy Carter was a Democrat from Georgia. He had just 1 term in office, and he lost to Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was from Illinois, and Ronald Reagan was from Illinois. He became governor of California. Of course, he was an actor. He's our only president to have been an actor. By the way, we've had a president who was almost became a medical doctor. I always forget to mention it when I'm going through the list, and that's William Henry Harrison. William Henry Harrison had registered and been a medical student at University of Pennsylvania, and he was trained by Dr. Benjamin Rush. I have a video discussing Dr. Benjamin Rush, who had been treasurer of the U.S. Mint, and he had been a friend of both Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, and he'd reconciled them and been the catalyst to the great correspondence of their post-presidency years. So William Henry Harrison had to drop out because of financial reasons, and he became a soldier. So he became a hero anyway, because from the Battle of Tippecanoe. I had stopped at Gerald Ford, by the way. Sorry, Ronald Reagan. I'd done Gerald Ford, who was from Nebraska, had 1 term, a Republican, and lost to Jimmy Carter, who was from Georgia, who had 1 term, Democrat. Lost to Ronald Reagan. That's who I was talking about, who was from Illinois, became governor of California, was an actor. He had 2 terms. He was our 40th president, and his vice president succeeded him, George H.W. Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush. I read his letters, the letters of George Herbert Walker Bush. He was a family man. He had the Distinguished Flying Cross. Funny, he was always bugged with being called a wimp throughout his life. Even though he was a war hero, he won the Distinguished Flying Cross as a naval aviator during the Second World War. He was from Connecticut, although he moved to Texas, became an oil man in Texas. He was an investment banker as well. So that's George H.W. Bush, a Republican. He had just 1 term in office. He was succeeded by Bill Clinton, who had been governor at 32 years old of Arkansas. Bill Clinton was from Arkansas. He had 2 terms in office. And after Bill Clinton, he was a Rhodes Scholar as well. Rhodes Scholar, but he didn't leave Oxford with a degree. He went on to Yale, and he didn't serve in Vietnam. They call him a draft dodger. Anyway, after Bill Clinton, by the way, he set a precedent because all presidents after Bill Clinton never served in the military. So they broke the pattern of U.S. presidents. Our presidents in the past, most of them had served in the military in one form or the other. But I guess from Bill Clinton on, they never served in the military anymore. George Bush was at least in the National Guard. He never saw battle or combat or anything, but at least he was in the National Guard. I think was it the Texas National Guard or something. So Bill Clinton, after Bill Clinton, 2 terms in office, Democrats, and from Arkansas. After Bill Clinton was George W. Bush, who was number 43. George W. Bush, the son of George H.W. Bush. He was born in Connecticut as well, like his dad, but he grew up in Texas, and he was governor of Texas. After George W. Bush was number 44, Barack Obama, who was born in Hawaii. He moved about a bit, lived in Indonesia when his mom married an Indonesian. And then he moved back and was raised by his parents. And then he moved to Illinois, and he, represented Illinois as a senator, was served in the Illinois House of Legislature. He was a lecturer at University of Chicago Law School. And Barack Obama had 2 terms in office, defeating John McCain, a war hero in the first time around, and he defeated Mitt Romney. He had been governor of Massachusetts, and also he'd been governor of Massachusetts, and he'd also been senator from Massachusetts. So Barack Obama, number 44, had 2 terms, born in Hawaii. He's taken up residence in Washington, D.C., by the way. So after number 44 was number 45. That's Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the only second person to have served 2 non-consecutive terms. Barack Obama was a Democrat, by the way, and George Bush was a Republican, like his dad. Bill Clinton was a Democrat, and Barack Obama was a Democrat, as I said. George W. Bush was a Republican. Had served as governor of Texas, and he was born in Connecticut. And then I was talking about Donald Trump, who's number 45, and number 47. He's our incumbent president right now. Donald Trump's from New York, even though he's taken up residency in Florida, where he was born in New York, spent most of his life in New York. Of course, the Trump Towers. I lived in New York as well, and the Trump Towers are all over New York. I've actually eaten. Yeah, I had a birthday lunch at the Trump Towers, one of his restaurants. It's called, is it John George or John George or whatever. So that's President Donald Trump, 45, and number 47. He's a Republican. And in between Donald Trump's 2 presidency, two presidencies is Joe Biden. Joe Biden from Pennsylvania, Scranton, Pennsylvania. And Joe Biden, of course, as a Democrat, he had served as a vice president to Barack Obama. Talking about vice president, George Clinton is not the only vice president. By the way, George Clinton also served two different presidents, right, as vice president. That's kind of like it's a bit odd. It's not typical. George Clinton, whom I said had died as the vice president, the first vice president to President James Madison, he was from New York. He had actually initially been the vice president to Thomas Jefferson. I'd mentioned this before. So he served two different people as vice president, and somebody else also was in that situation. John Calhoun. John Calhoun was vice president to John Quincy Adams, and John Calhoun was also vice president to Andrew Jackson. John Calhoun was from South Carolina. Of course, he's notorious for the Nullifier Party. He formed the Nullifier Party in South Carolina during the controversy of the abomination, the Tariff of Abominations, which was passed by John Quincy Adams in 1828, signed by John Quincy Adams. So there you have it. I've given a list of all presidents, their tenure, the terms in office, and the states they're affiliated with. So this was about 35 minutes. So I'll call this All American Presidents in 35 minutes. My name is Olu Osha. I like talking about US presidents. I also draw attention to color of law violations, which I've been suffering in Montgomery County, Maryland. I was framed by Montgomery County Police, suffering police brutality in my home without probable cause. There was a perjured EAP filed by Ajide Iwarere in order to impede complaints that I'd filed with the economic EEOC. That's the EEOC is, when you have a discrimination or hostile work environment complaint, if you're a federal government employee, you file with the EEOC. So I'd filed with the EEOC. I'd also reported fraud to Office of Special Counsel and Inspector General's offices. So I think, evidence suggests that the swatting, I was swatted by Montgomery County Police and Jide Iwarere. So the swatting was intended to impede and obstruct justice, to block the ongoing federal government investigations, to discredit me as well. So these false charges have been filed against me. Of course, I have a law degree from George Washington University Law School. I'm a law-abiding American citizen. I also have a bachelor's in history. I had from Columbia University in New York. I'd been a biological science student. I'd been an engineering major as well. I switched. I graduated with a degree in history and mathematics. I did mathematics at Columbia University. I have a Master of Business Administration in Accounting from Troy University. So several degrees. I also have a bachelor's honors history from University of Jos in Nigeria. So several degrees that I have in history. So I like talking about history. And I also did international human rights law at Oxford University. I decided to use this moment because I've been detained wrongfully in in Maryland. I've not been allowed to travel. This case is now going on for 3 years. They're trumped up charges. It's a form of prosecutorial misconduct filed to prevent me from bringing suit against the police who assaulted me, committed police misconduct in my home, and it's prevented me from traveling to go and see my aged mother. My mother's 84 years old, and I haven't gone home since 1999. I'm an American citizen, but my rights have been violated. My right to work has been violated by Judge James Bonifant of Montgomery County, Maryland, and the state attorney's office. That's headed by the state attorney, John McCarthy in Montgomery County, Maryland. This is a travesty, a perversion of justice, and it's astonishing, it's barbaric, it's antediluvian, straight out of the Ark. It's reprehensible that it's happening right here in Maryland, in America, which is supposed to be a city upon a hill. It's supposed to be a shining example to the rest of the world. In any event, I'll keep you posted. Thank you.